Every time you get behind the wheel and drive a vehicle like this, you experience a subtle yet unmistakable sense of dissonance. On the one hand, it's actually quite comfortable and pleasant. After all, you're driving a Volga, and you naturally expect to travel in this car with that amazing signature Volga comfort, almost as if you were gliding smoothly on a barge. Yeah, the balalaika, you see, it really doesn't ride in a graceful manner at all. In fact, it pushes back against you with all of its axles and the transfer case. There is, of course, still some of that signature Volga swaying motion, but it's somehow, in a way, a little bit different. Nice, a little roundabout, time to turn around. Wow, that's an incredibly massive turning radius. But it's a soft car. It doesn't exactly glide, but it really gets to you. But honestly, I want to note the following. The long wheelbase had a positive effect. The nervousness of the UAZ is a thing of the past, and the engine pulls this technical marvel with ease. There's no feeling that all the car's components are constantly resisting. Well, they do resist, but only half-heartedly. We've gotten spoiled, my friends. We get tired of real iron machinery pretty quickly. And so, I'm tired and sweaty, and I instinctively start looking for where to turn on the air conditioner. I know, in my car. Why do I remember the 90s with nostalgia? I am 20. Everything around is changing like a kaleidoscope. The future is uncertain, but it's very exciting. And most importantly, ahead lie unlimited opportunities and paths. More often, the paths were only just being outlined, and few really understood where they would lead. But that didn't scare off the passionate and the bold. They tried, and for many, things even worked out at the very beginning. There are plenty of examples. And many of those examples are certainly around me. Yes, I'm here in a renowned place, and Andre, once again, truly and deeply brings joy to my heart. Yes, it may look like a handcrafted, homemade creation, but it's actually a fully industrial development. Attempts to create something like this, specifically to put a civilian body onto something rugged and throw it into the mud, were made regularly all over the world. But since we're not talking about the whole world, I'll give an example from our own history. Let's recall, during the Great Patriotic War, there was the MK, the GAZ-31022, then the GAZ-31022, and much later, the GAZ-31022. There are several reasons for this. First, very few of these models were produced. Second, all of them were used by agencies inaccessible to ordinary people. And yes, most importantly, in almost half a century of use, according to unconfirmed reports, only 2 of these cars remain in running condition. But that's not certain. What is certain, however, is that only 5 of these cars were produced. The initiative came from the Gorky Regional Party Committee. They thought it would be a good idea to create an off-road vehicle based on a comfortable and modern car of that time. Essentially, there was some project documentation, albeit provisional, and 2 companies made use of it. Techno Service, which was based in Nizhny Novgorod, and CJSC Vishnyaki Center from Moscow. Techno Service approached the process creatively, trying to build comfortable cars from rather outdated but still beloved and popular models. Want a more powerful engine? No problem. Rover, Toyota, you name it. The most powerful option on the list was the 3.3-liter Toyota 5VZ FE engine with 190 horsepower. You could even install an imported transmission, either a manual or an automatic from Toyota. You get it? For your money, any whim could be satisfied. Who was the first to desire such a Volga? History does not say. But there are rumors that the car was developed for the far north. The base was the body from the GAZ-31022. Although calling it a base is debatable, you'll understand why later. What is the GAZ-31022? The only thing it shares with the 31st Volga is the Gorky automobile plant territory, but the real father here is more like the sheep bull in all its glory. GAZ-31022. That is, if you're looking for similarities in the front. But as for the rest, the entire rear section, we're not paying attention to the details. So the entire rear section of the wagon comes from the GAZ-2402, which went into production in the year 1972 as part of the vehicle's design, including the stamping for the reflectors. Why invent something new when you already really have something like this? The GAZ-31022 was produced from 1992 to 1997. Next, the luxurious, comfortable body was mounted onto a frame. It was simpler, cheaper, and just made sense overall. The frame, also domestically produced, came from the equally modern, at the time, UAZ vehicle. And this could be either an extended UAZ Patriot or a Hunter. Moreover, the frame was modified. This is something that's always emphasized everywhere, which honestly makes sense. After all, the Volga and UAZ bodies are quite different, so they had to marry the body and the frame together. That's why the floor of the body was changed, exactly. They put in the effort, reinforcing the side members, welding the firewall, adding gussets and other structural elements everywhere. Strength is also built into the sills, which proudly stick out on the sides. What's the point of this strength? It's that they protect the body if you bottom out, and you can easily put a high lift jack under them and they'll hold up just fine. And here's something else. The car is from the year 2000. And you, my young viewer, of course remember that the Sare was produced until 97. So what conclusion should we draw? In theory, Komandors can be put together from many parts, even ones picked up from under a fence. Which is exactly what the Vishnyaki Center was doing. This is their creation. Let's move on to the chassis. Ulyanovsk factory, just as it is, unchanged. In many respected publications, the ones that use letters, they say the front axle is spring-based. In theory, that's possible. The UAZ 3153 has springs. But here there's another anachronism, a leaf spring axle, with the front mounts just sticking out from under the original bumper. You can also see a plug up front for a theoretical winch. Overall, of course, it's a strange choice to go with leaf springs. After all, as is well known, UAZ only started making front coil spring suspension around 94. Although probably it's understandable, it's cheaper and easier to repair. If anything, the rear suspension is also leaf springs. It's supposed to be from a UAZ 3153, but in reality, it could be from a 469. Small leaf springs, 4 leaves, with U-bolts holding the axle itself in place. One end of each spring is clamped in a silent block, the other is suspended on a shackle. The brakes are drum brakes all around. They only work impressively when the car is standing still. By the way, it has a 5-speed manual gearbox from a Hyundai Demus. I want to open the trunk, but no way, noble dawns. I would say it's a tradition. Although it's already quite clear what's inside anyway, to be perfectly honest. But you really do have to take a moment to truly appreciate the impressive height. And for the curious, let me remind you that the minimum trunk volume of all GAZ station wagons is 500 liters. And the maximum is 4,000 liters. If you fold down the rear row, in terms of the orthodox monarchist language, that means you can fit 1.5 cubic meters of cargo. The spare tire, as our grandfathers bequeathed, is in a separate compartment under the floor. The entire space is finished with metal and dust. The seating position. I love it so much. You get in and plop down into the seat. The one thing you can't ruin in a Volga is the seating position. And what's surprising is that it's comfortable here, even though it's a wagon, and for the rear passengers too. I don't know how it was with the Vishniaks, but for example, the lock has been moved down to the right. Probably convenient. You won't be kicking it with your foot. Door pockets. The armrest is standard, but at least there's rear air vents and a little heater. See, the blue hoses go to the rear assembly. And that makes sense. The volume? The tail isn't epic, but you still need to heat it somehow. The Volga, honestly, is pretty stylish for the 2000s. The 31105 in all its puffy beauty, where puffiness is a sign of luxury. Of course, some crafty, wicked genius customized it for himself. For example, he installed a radio, but that didn't ruin the luxury. The rear passengers also got a touch of comfort in the form of a soft sofa in pleasant colors. While Tekenkum bothered with imported engines, in Vishnyaki they used whatever was more practical and cheaper. In our case, it's a ZMZ, 16 valves. A 2.3-liter injector, 145 horsepower. I feel like saying something more about the engine, but actually no, I don't. As I always say, it definitely can accelerate to 100, but it's impossible to know the exact number. By the time you get the Komandor up to 100, daylight will be over. And honestly, it's silly to even try, especially on wheels like these. Although the UAZ, the one that donated its axles, took more than 30 seconds to get up to speed. There's the transfer case lever on the floor, and by the way, that's not just a piece of interior decor. The steering wheel has power steering. And so you sit in the seat, get used to it with your backside, your feet get accustomed to the pedals, you settle in, resign yourself to the hopelessness, and you even start to enjoy it. But it's a heavy ship, really heavy. Here's something interesting, though it's not certain. The Komandor is an official model from the Gorky automobile plant. The model passed all the necessary tests and trials, and ultimately it received certification from NAMI, or so they say. Information about the number of cars produced varies. Some say 10, others say 20, but as always, the truth is somewhere in the middle. The idea was genuinely good, and it was in demand and truly necessary in those years, but as is often the case, everything that's handmade and produced in small limited batches was very expensive. By the way, do you know how much a Komandor costs today? In the year 2019, the car cost about 200,000, but now, in the present day, it's over $1 million. That's how it is, and the story continues.